Welcome to the third webinar in our Education COVID-19 Insights programme. The topic today is cyber threats to schools and colleges. My name is Ben Lear and I look after the education side here at Hayes Parsons Insurance Brokers. I am joined by my colleague Mark Rose, who is one of our education account executives, and it will be Mark who will be delivering today's content. Before I pass over to Mark, just to confirm, there will be a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. We have already received some questions in advance, but should you wish to submit your own whilst the webinar is in progress, please do so through the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and we'll add these to the list. Mark, I'll pass it over to you, please.
Thanks very much, Ben. So this is the short agenda for today's webinar. I'm going to work through workplace technology and risks, vulnerabilities and managing the risks, and additional resources available and the questions and answers. So workplace technology offerings have continued to expand and evolve within organisations across the UK. Indeed, the vast majority of schools now depend on at least one type of digital service to conduct key operations, whether it's an online bank account, email, social media, websites, or electronic data storage, particularly, of course, at the moment, distance learning and home learning. While such services can certainly provide a wide range of benefits to schools, the risks that come with technology implementation are significant. In just the past 12 months, 46% of businesses and 26% of charities have experienced a data breach or cyber attack. For schools and colleges, these figures are even higher, with 76% of secondary schools having identified breaches or attacks in the last 12 months. So where are the attacks coming from? Advanced hacking software and savvy scanning techniques are largely responsible for the startling number of data breaches throughout the UK. Among the organisations that experienced a cyber attack within the last 12 months, 86% reported falling victim to phishing attacks, 26% were impersonated by a cyber criminal, and 19% dealt with a malware incident, including ransomware. For schools, these are the main areas that have been reported as having attacks. So 93% involved fraudulent emails and emails directing staff to fraudulent websites. 24% reported others impersonating the school either online or in emails. 29% suffer from viruses, spyware and malware. And 31% experience unauthorised use of computers, networks or servers, largely by students. 18% had denial of service attacks where hackers gain access and prevent access to files. And 7% had attempted hacking or hacking of the online bank accounts. So what can the consequences of these attacks be? They can be severe. Loss or stolen data, business interruption, costly fines for non-compliance under the General Data Protection Regulation, and of course, reputational damage. Imagine having to communicate to your parents that you have had their personal details stolen. An awkward few conversations, I would imagine. One of the schools that I looked after, on first transferring to electronic reports for children, had every report accidentally sent to the wrong parents. Their phones started ringing within minutes. Fortunately, many organisations are taking steps to prevent the growing risk of cyber attacks from wreaking havoc within their workplace. In fact, 80% of businesses and 74% of charities now rate cybersecurity as a high priority in their organisation. Such a statistic emphasises the importance of taking part in this rising effort to combat cybercrime. It's important that schools do so too. But at schools, what's really vulnerable? You gather information about pupils and parents, whether it's names, addresses, contact information, school reports, education and healthcare plans, often financial information or other important data. Schools are at risk of liability if security is breached accidentally or, for example, through employee misconduct. This can happen within or even through a third party hacking into the company's system. So managing the risks, how can we manage them? There are a number of ways that schools can protect themselves, but in the main, these boil down to three main controls. Schools need to develop and carefully abide by a cybersecurity policy that includes an information privacy policy and security breach prevention plans, and ensure that the policy abides by the General Data Protection Regulation. An essential part of your security policy should include data encryption and proper handling of private information. One of the most important aspects is that employees should be trained in the proper procedures to maintain data security. So what would a cybersecurity policy look like? In effect, you need to protect your networks from attack by filtering out unauthorized access, by using strong password controls and virtual private networks. You need to monitor and test the security controls. There are professional companies that you can engage to attempt to hack your systems and establish your vulnerabilities. Have in place user security policies covering acceptable and secure use of your systems. Block access to inappropriate sites. This is where staff training comes in, not just once off, but maintaining awareness of cyber risks. Establish and maintain anti-malware defences across your school networks with automatic updates. Put in place controls for access to removable media, limiting media types and the use of them around the school. Scan media for malware before importing it onto the school system. Ensure automatic updates for security patches are turned on. Establish effective management processes and limit the number of privileged accounts. That is, those accounts or user accounts that can access areas that others can't. Limit the user privileges and monitor user activity. Make sure you control access to activity and audit logs so they can't be adjusted. Establish a monitoring process and continuously monitor all systems and networks, analysing logs for unusual activity that could indicate an attack. What would you do in the event of an incident occurring? Establishing an incident response and disaster recovery capability before anything happens can help limit future damage. Don't forget to test your incident management plans and to have in place procedures for reporting criminal incidents to law enforcement and insurers. Develop a mobile working policy and train staff to adhere to it, protecting data both in transit and at rest. That last point brings us on to home working and distance learning. Are your staff, whilst working from home, using the school's equipment or their own personal devices? With school equipment, you can ensure all the correct and safe software is in place and that they can't access inappropriate sites. It's harder with staff using their own personal devices as you can't easily control what they have on them. But you can control how they access a school network through secure channels and prevent them from downloading documents to their hard drive. If it is necessary for them to do this, then make it clear in the policy that once a document is completed and uploaded to the school system, it should be deleted from their hard drive and their recycle bin emptied. Don't allow staff to access the school network via a public Wi-Fi. I've seen a number of cases where people have logged in via public Wi-Fi at, say, a cafe, but they haven't logged in onto the cafe's actual Wi-Fi, but rather one that is a criminal one made to look like the cafe's own Wi-Fi. Access to the school system should be via secure VPNs, password controlled and data transfer being encrypted end to end. And I can't emphasize it enough, but once again, staff training. We have additional resources or added additional resources to the Hayes Parsons website to assist you in considerations for cybersecurity. This includes a cyber exposure calculator where you can go through the questions and work out what your exposure is and how you're dealing with it. A cybersecurity breaches survey, and then a couple of generic employee cyber training, one covering communications and one covering device security. So I'll now hand back to Ben.
Mark, thank you very much for that. I'm pleased to say we do have some questions, so we'll commence with those now. The first one is, what can staff do to minimise a cyber attack occurring? Do you have any helpful tips?
In the main, it's be vigilant, particularly with emails, as this is probably where the biggest risk lays. We mentioned 93% earlier for schools that experience attacks. We all receive a large number of emails, often from people that we don't know. Sometimes they appear to come from people that we do know, and yet they may not read in the way you expect them to. So just be vigilant. Check addresses and links by hovering your mouse over them to check where they go. Don't click until you're absolutely sure. If your suspicion is aroused, then pick up a phone and call a number that you know will get you in touch with the person, not necessarily the number that appears on the email. So in the main, I'll say vigilance.
Okay, thank you. Turning to attacks themselves, are they targeted against schools and colleges directly, and are they on the increase, or in part are they succumbing to indirect attacks as a result of the increased use of digital platforms?
Well, it's actually a bit of both, really. Indirect attacks are increasing without a doubt, and cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated in the methods they're using. The most recent government survey suggests that they are all on the increase. Now, from a school point of view, I've certainly had more school report incidents to me in the last couple of years than I've ever had before. So my gut feeling is that schools are being targeted more often now than ever before.
Thank you. Schools have a plethora of various policies, with the governors having the ultimate oversight. But in respect of the schools or colleges' IT policy, where should the responsibility rest?
Well, ultimately, as with all aspects of school life, the responsibility rests with the governors, but responsibility on the sort of day-to-day aspects are usually delegated to the IT manager. But it's important the governors put in place the framework and resources required to combat the cyber threats that the schools face. That's really important, to have that framework in place and make sure there are sufficient funds to sort through that with the IT manager.
Okay, thank you. Cyber insurance, it uses some quite technical language which may be a little bit unfamiliar. Could you explain, please, what is the difference between cyber crime and general crime?
The term cyber is anything to do with information technology, so all aspects of computing, data storage, data protection, anything basically to do with data. So that's opposed to cyber crime. Cyber crime are crimes relating to the use of information technology to commit that crime. Now, crime itself is much wider, so it doesn't just relate to crimes involving IT. It could be other forms of fraud. For example, when you have a contractor in and you receive a letter from the contractor advising they have changed their bank account. However, that letter is actually from a criminal gang, and they have simply made it look like it's come from the contractor. So you should always have a policy in place that any changes to bank account details are verified with a known contact at the suppliers. It's also worth remembering that cyber liability is different from cyber crime. Cyber liability in the main is your liability to others following loss of data. Cyber liability insurance can sometimes be extended to include cybercrime, or cybercrime can be arranged under another policy.
Thank you again. So to take that a little bit further, I'm a school and I hypothetically have a cyber attack. What should my expectations be in respect of what the actual cyber insurance policy will do?
A cyber liability policy will respond. It covers the breach costs, so offering sort of practical support in the event of a data breach, whether it's electronic or otherwise. It includes forensic investigations, because your system might have been broken into, but you don't know whether anything's been taken. So the insurers would provide that technical expertise to do a forensic investigation of your computer systems to see if anything has been taken. You'll get legal advice from them. If necessary, if items have been taken, personal information taken, then it's notifying customers or regulators and also offering support such as credit monitoring to affected fee payers for the schools. It would also include crisis containment. So in the event of a data breach, what's really important is some prompt, confident communication. That's really critical to help minimise the damage to the school's reputation. And that's all provided under the policy. It would include cyber business interruption, so that's compensation basically for any loss of income, including where it's caused by damage to your reputation. So if a hacker targets your systems and prevents your school from earning revenue for certain areas. It includes cyber extortion, so protecting you if a hacker tries to hold your business to ransom, with any final ransom either being paid, or they will use risk consultancy firms to see whether or not they can reinstate all of your previous backups to get your data back to where it was, get rid of the virus, and avoid you having to pay out any sort of ransom. Then it also includes hacker damage, so reimbursing you for the cost of repair or restoration, and replacement if a hacker causes any damage to your websites, programs, or electronic data. Privacy protection, so insurers will pay to defend and settle any claims that are made against you for failing to keep parents' personal data secure. They will also pay the costs associated with regulatory investigation and settle civil penalties levied by regulators where that's allowed. There's multimedia liability as an additional section under cyber liability. So the policies usually include protection if you have mistakenly infringed someone's copyright by using a picture online on your website, for example, or inadvertently libeling a third party in an email or other electronic communication. Then if you've extended your cyber liability to include cybercrime or have a separate cybercrime, then you would also have a couple of things like funds transfer fraud or social engineering fraud. So that's email frauds, fraudulent use of your telephone systems, because these days so many telephone systems are also interlinked with all the IT side. So in essence, it's you losing money through the cyber crime side, is you losing money through fraudulent means using cyber techniques. So through the use of computer technology.
There's quite a lot of content in that answer, so I would remind the attendees on this particular webinar that we will be emailing over the whole webinar afterwards, so you can take a look back at your leisure, and it will also be on our website. We have a couple more questions, and the first one relates to Cyber Essentials. So sometimes when you do online banking, there is a prominent tick with Cyber Essentials next to it. What does Cyber Essentials refer to?
This is basically a government-backed scheme that will help you to protect your school, your organisation, whatever size it is, against a whole range of the most common cyber attacks. There are two levels of accreditation, Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. The first is a self-assessment of the technical controls that you have in place, and compliance with it gives you the peace of mind that the defences you have in place will protect you against the majority of common cyber attacks. Then with Cyber Essentials Plus, that's a slightly further step. So it's a further sort of hands-on technical verification being carried out on the school systems and protections.
Okay, thank you. And the final question, what is the threshold for reporting losses of data to the ICO?
There's no threshold in numbers as such. The threshold is literally if you've lost any data, whether it's one person's details or numerous people's details, if that could potentially cause them any sort of harm or losses, that needs to be referred to the Information Commissioner's Office. But it may be that you've lost some details, but it's not that important. It varies a lot. And if you go onto the ICO website, there is actually a self-assessment area on there, which takes about 5 minutes to go through, which will help you determine whether or not the breach that has occurred is one that is actually reportable to the ICO.
Very helpful, thank you. And that concludes all the questions that we have received, and indeed concludes the webinar on cyber threats. Should you need more information, please do visit our coronavirus hub, as mentioned by Mark, or indeed contact either of us to discuss any matter regarding cyber threats further. Thank you very much for joining us.